So today I'm going to teach you how to do a multi-drop peyote bracelet. Now with a normal peyote bracelet you would add one bead at a time, and this particular pattern will go between 2 beads, 1 bead, and 3 beads, give or take. So just as you would with a regular peyote bracelet, we're going to do the first row of the pattern to start off our base. And some people prefer to tape the end of the thread down. I just hold it so that the beads don't come over the other end. Leave a nice tail for you to hang on to. And this is the base of the bracelet. So now for the next row, I'm going to start off by adding 2 of the first beads because this is a 2-drop stitch. So you add 2 beads and then you go into the next stitch, which happens to be a single drop. So I will go into the single bead after that. And then the next stitch, according to the pattern, happens to be a 3-drop stitch. So I will add those 3 beads and then go through the next stitch. And the next stitch happens to be a single drop, so I will skip 3 beads since this is a 3-drop stitch, go through the single bead that follows. Then according to the pattern, the next stitch is a 2-drop stitch, so I will add the 2 beads next to the next 2 beads, going into the next stitch, which is a single drop. And all the time I'm holding my tail so that none of the beads come off the end. The next stitch is a 3-drop. And then a 2-drop. Going into a single drop. And then a 3-drop. And finally, since this is an odd peyote stitch, the last one is 2, just as before. So to help secure, I will tie a single square stitch knot on these 2 ends. Since I want the knot to be more hidden, I'm going to then take the tail end and go through one of these previous stitches, so that when I come back down after my next row, I'll tie it more securely inside the bead. So now I will go back through the last stitch I just added. So I'm coming out in the other direction to continue on. I will move my card so I'm on to the next stitch of the pattern. And all of these will be single drops, but they will go through the multi-drops that I added previously. Single drop, go through the 3-drop added previously. go through the 2 drop added previously. And that is the 3rd row, so now I will move on to the next row of the pattern. And once again, this row consists of 2 and 3 drop stitches, but I will be going back through the single drops added in the previous step. Because I want to tie off the end of this thread, I'm going to add this last row, and once again, because this is odd stitch, you'd have to stitch back through so you're coming out the right side. I'm going to stitch through here and then come out so I can finish tying off the tail end before I go back through. So now in a more secure place, I'll do a triple square knot. Cut off that tail end. And thread back through so you're coming out of the stitch, ready to add the next stitch. And because this is peyote stitch, now you'll just have to, when you reach the end of the row, thread back through the previous base, down a row below, back up, and back down so you're facing the appropriate direction. Then you'll just continue to follow the pattern, doing single and multi-drop. It's just as easy as peyote stitch. In fact, it's even faster because on multiple stitches you're adding more than 1 bead at a time. So once you're finished with the regular peyote, you'll be able to finish off your bracelet. For this bracelet example, I'm going to be finishing it off with a loop and button closure. So I have a button and I'm going to be adding it on the other side. So over here I'm going to be using a piece of cord to make some loops that the button that will go on the other side will go through. So I'm going to take my needle and thread and come down through, or I'm going to go through this middle section where there are these golden beads and add a loop of beads. Ten beads about here that I'll tie the cord to. So I'll thread back through this last stitch, this center stitch, which happens to be of 3 beads, so wherever that lands on in your design. And thread those beads through so there's a loop. And I'm going to go back through the beads a couple times so that it's nice and strong. Now I'm going to thread back through the beadwork and tie the thread off in a spot where it can be nice and hidden. Tie it by going through a random stitch. Now I want to retie my thread over on the other side of the bracelet so I can add the button to this portion. So in the middle of the beadwork, a couple rows down, I'm going to tie the thread so it's nice and hidden. Then I'm going to thread my needle back through to the place where I want the button to come out, which is right, not at the very last row, but in between the first 2 rows, or in the middle of these 4 rows of beads. So I will come out through and thread through one of the holes in the button. Thread back over through and through the next stitch of beads. So there isn't any exposed thread on the underside. Then back up through the next hole, over, through a bead that will go down so you can enter into the first hole you entered. And continue to repeat this so that the button is securely stitched to the bracelet. Once you've got it on there pretty securely, go ahead and weave your thread back through a few stitches so you can tie it in a hidden place. So then for your last step, we're going to add the cord to the other end so that the button can loop through it. So going through the loop that we added, from here you're going to tie knots to create multiple loops so this bracelet has multiple size options. So depending on how wide it needs to be for the size of your button, so it's good and tight. So there's one size. And there's another. So now this bracelet has two options. You can either go around the first loop or the second loop for a wider wrist.